Lick it clean! The command echoed through the sterile white kitchen of Magnan corporate headquarters. 3 identical 4-year-old girls, their small brown faces streaked with rain and tears, stared up at the puddle on the spotless tile floor. The smallest, Nessa, reached toward it with trembling hands. Above her, Cynthia Parsons, the head supervisor, stood with her arms crossed, her face twisted in disgust. Behind the frosted glass door, Elliot Mangan, CEO and owner of the billion-dollar corporation, had just stepped into the hallway. He froze as he watched the scene through the glass. What the cruel supervisor didn't know was that her boss was about to lose control, that this moment of humiliation would cost her everything, and that these 3 small children would unlock a secret Elliot had been searching for since the day the woman he loved vanished without a trace 5 years ago. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what you think will happen next. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Get out of this kitchen! You're dripping mud everywhere! Cynthia Parsons's voice cut through the quiet hum of the executive floor like a blade. The 3 small girls huddled together just inside the doorway of the pristine corporate kitchen, their matching rain-soaked braids dripping onto the white tile. Outside, thunder rumbled over the Manhattan skyline. The storm had been raging for hours. The girls looked exactly the same dark brown skin, same wide, frightened eyes, same threadbare jackets that did nothing against the cold. They were only 4 years old. "We're looking for our mommy," said the tallest of the triplets, Nia. Her voice was soft but steady. "She works here." Cynthia stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the tile. Her blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her tailored gray suit fit like armor. She ran the executive services division of Magnan Corporate with an iron fist, every surface gleaming, every employee terrified. "I don't care who your mother is. This is a private executive kitchen. Children don't belong here. Rich people work on this floor." Her eyes scanned the girls with open contempt. "Look at you. You're tracking filth across my clean floors." Inside Magnan Tower, everything was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Every surface was white, glass, or stainless steel. Cynthia Parsons made sure of that. As head supervisor, she believed only certain people belonged in these spaces. She often told her staff, "Standards exist for a reason." "Please, ma'am," said the middle triplet, Nola, her voice breaking. "We just need to find our mommy. She cleans the offices here. Her name is—" "Not my problem," Cynthia interrupted, checking her watch. "Security will escort you out." The girls had been searching for hours. Their mother, Naomi Carter, had left for work that morning before dawn, as always, but had forgotten to leave money for food. The girls were cold, hungry, and scared. When the storm started, they'd made their way to the only place they knew their mother would be. A sudden crack of thunder made the smallest girl, Nessa, jump forward. She stumbled, and the small paper cup of water she'd been clutching, given to her by a kind security guard downstairs, flew from her hands and splashed across the white tile floor. Cynthia gasped as if she'd been struck. "Do you know how much it costs to maintain these floors?" Nessa looked down at the spreading puddle, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Cynthia grabbed Nessa's thin arm, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into the child's wet jacket. The other 2 girls watched, frozen in terror. "You dirty little thing," Cynthia hissed, pulling Nessa toward the puddle. "You're going to clean this up. With your tongue. Lick it clean." Tears spilled down Nessa's cheeks. She was so cold, so tired, so hungry. Slowly, she began to lower her head toward the floor. What the hell is going on here? A deep voice cut through the tension like a thunderclap. A tall man with dark hair and sharp blue eyes stood in the doorway, his suit jacket still damp from running through the rain. He'd just returned from an off-site meeting. His eyes locked on Cynthia's hand, gripping Nessa's arm. "Mr. Mangan!" Cynthia released Nessa immediately, smoothing her suit. "I was just dealing with some trespassers. These children. I saw what you were doing." Elliot Mangan stepped into the kitchen, his voice deadly quiet. He owned this building. He owned this company. Magnon Corporate was his empire. 30 offices across 3 continents built from nothing. You were forcing a child to lick the floor. Sir, they're disrupting the workplace. They're dirty. You're fired, Cynthia. Clear out your office now. Cynthia's face went white, then red. "Mr. Mangan, I've worked here for 8 years. You can't just—" "I can, and I am. What you were doing is unconscionable. We don't abuse children here. We don't abuse anyone here. Get your things, and then leave this building immediately." Cynthia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, she spun on her heel and stalked out, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. Elliot knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the triplets. His heart was still pounding with rage, but he softened his voice. "Are you girls okay?" The 3 nodded silently, still holding hands in a tight line. "You look freezing and hungry. Would you like to come to my office? I can get you something warm to eat, and we can call your mother." Nia, the bravest, spoke for her sisters. "Yes, please. Thank you, sir." Elliot led the 3 identical girls through the executive floor. Employees stopped mid-conversation to stare as they passed. The girls' wet, worn-out clothes and muddy shoes looked impossibly out of place among the sleek desks and expensive art. In his corner office, all windows and leather and dark wood, Elliot wrapped them in soft blankets from his private lounge. He called his assistant to bring hot soup, sandwiches, and apple juice. As the girls ate hungrily, clutching the warm bowls with both hands, Elliot watched them. There was something achingly familiar about their faces, the shape of their eyes, the curve of their cheeks, the way the smallest one tilted her head when she was thinking. "What are your names?" he asked gently. Between bites, they introduced themselves. "I'm Naya. I'm Nola. I'm Nessa." "Those are beautiful names," Elliot said, his chest tightening with an emotion he couldn't name. "And your mother, you said she works here." "Yes, sir," Naya explained. "She cleans the offices at night. She works really hard. She said this building is really, really tall and really, really important." "What's your mother's name?" "Naomi Carter." Elliot's world stopped. The room seemed to tilt. His vision blurred at the edges. He gripped the armrest of his chair. Naomi Carter. He hadn't heard that name in 5 years. 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days, to be exact. Not that he'd been counting. Not that he'd spent countless sleepless nights wondering where she'd gone, why she'd left, whether she was safe. Naomi. His Naomi. The woman who'd worked as a cleaning assistant at his family's private estate. The woman with the gentle laugh and fierce intelligence. The woman he'd fallen in love with in stolen moments, late-night conversations in the library, shared coffee in the kitchen before dawn, whispered confessions in the garden. The woman who had disappeared without a word, without a goodbye, without a trace. Elliot looked at the 3 girls again, really looked at them this time. They were 4 years old. Naomi had vanished 5 years ago. The timeline was impossible to ignore. The girls had Naomi's warm brown skin, her delicate bone structure. But they had his mother's smile, his father's chin, his own eyes. That particular shade of blue-gray that ran in the Mangan family for generations. These weren't just three hungry children who'd stumbled into his building seeking their mother. These were his daughters. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His hands started to shake. His breath caught in his throat. He had children. 3 beautiful daughters. And he'd never known they existed. "I knew your mother," Elliot said carefully, his voice barely steady. "A long time ago. I want to help you. I want to help her. Where does she work in this building?" The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. "The basement," Naya said quietly. "She works in the laundry room in the basement. She washes all the towels and uniforms." Elliot stood, his heart hammering. Naomi was here. She'd been here, in his building, possibly for months or years, working in the basement while he worked on the top floor. So close, yet worlds apart. "Stay here," he told the girls gently. "My assistant will stay with you. I'm going to find your mother right now." As he strode toward the elevator, his mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one thought overwhelmed all others. After 5 years of silence, 5 years of searching, 5 years of wondering, I'm about to see her again, and I'm going to demand answers. The elevator descended in silence, each floor counting down like a countdown to something Elliot couldn't name. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors. A man who'd built an empire, who commanded boardrooms and controlled millions, now completely undone by 3 small faces and a name he'd tried for 5 years to forget. Naomi Carter. The basement level dinged. The doors slid open to reveal a world utterly different from the gleaming executive floors above. Here, the walls were plain concrete, the lighting fluorescent and harsh. The air smelled of industrial detergent and steam. This was where the invisible work happened. The laundry, the maintenance, the machinery that kept the pristine tower running. Elliot's expensive shoes echoed on the concrete floor as he followed the signs toward the laundry facilities. His heart hammered against his ribs. What would he say to her? What could he possibly say after 5 years of silence? Why did you leave? Where did you go? Why didn't you tell me? The questions had haunted him for so long they'd become part of his DNA, woven into every sleepless night, every woman he'd tried and failed to move on with, every moment he'd stood alone in that estate garden where they used to meet. The laundry room door was propped open, releasing waves of hot, damp air into the hallway. Inside, industrial washing machines churned and tumbled, dryers hummed their monotonous song, and there, with her back to him, folding white towels at a long metal table, stood a woman whose silhouette he would have recognized anywhere. She was thinner than he remembered. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the loose curls she used to wear. She wore the standard gray uniform of the cleaning staff, shapeless, anonymous, designed to make the wearer invisible. But Elliot would know her anywhere. Naomi. Her hands froze mid-fold. The towel slipped through her fingers. For a long moment, she didn't turn around, didn't move at all, except for the slight rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathed. When she finally turned, it was slow, reluctant, like someone facing an execution. Her face. God, her face. Still beautiful. Still the face that haunted his dreams, but worn now, tired. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. lines of worry around her mouth. Her lips parted. No sound came out at first. Then, barely a whisper. Elliot. The way she said his name, like a prayer, like a confession, like an apology, nearly broke him. Your daughters are in my office, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. 3 of them, triplets. They said you work here. Naomi's face went pale. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, the girls. They came here? In this storm? They're supposed to be… She swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. Elliot moved forward instinctively, reaching out to steady her. But she stepped back, putting the metal table between them like a barrier. They're safe, he said quickly. They're warm and fed. But Naomi, they were being… His jaw clenched. My head supervisor was making them clean up a spill. She was forcing the smallest one to lick the floor. Naomi's face crumpled. Nessa. Oh God, Nessa. She's so sensitive. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I have to go to them. I have to… They're fine now. I promise. Elliot took a careful step forward. I fired the supervisor. The girls are safe in my office with my assistant. But Naomi… He paused, trying to find the right words, knowing there were no right words. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. I'll collect my daughters and leave. I'm sorry they disturbed you. It won't happen again. Disturbed me? Elliot's voice rose despite himself. Naomi, you disappeared 5 years ago. Vanished without a trace. I looked for you everywhere. He stopped, forcing himself to breathe. And now I find out you've been working in my building? In the basement? How long? 8 months. Her voice was barely audible. 8 months. He repeated it like he couldn't quite believe it. You were here for 8 months, and you never… What did you expect me to do, Elliot? Her voice cracked. Show up at your office? Hi, remember me, the maid you used to sneak around with? I'm nothing here. No one. I clean toilets and fold towels. You're the CEO. We exist in different worlds. That's not… He stopped, frustrated. That's not how I saw us, ever. Isn't it? Naomi's laugh was bitter, broken. Your family made it very clear where I stood. Before Elliot could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. The girls are asking for their mother. Should I bring them down? They want you, Elliot said, showing her the message. Come upstairs, please. We can talk after you see them. Naomi hesitated, clearly torn, but maternal instinct won out. She nodded, pulling off her work apron with shaking hands. They rode the elevator in suffocating silence. Elliot watched her in his peripheral vision, the way she kept her eyes fixed on the floor numbers, the way her hands twisted together, the way she seemed to be holding her breath. His mind kept circling back to one impossible, terrifying, hope-filled thought. The girls were 4 years old. 4. And Naomi had disappeared 5 years ago. The math was screaming at him, but he needed to hear her say it. He needed to know for certain. When the elevator opened on the executive floor, Naomi stepped out hesitantly, like she was trespassing. Employees glanced up from their desks, curiosity obvious on their faces. Elliot ignored them, leading her quickly to his office. The moment the door opened, 3 small voices shrieked, "Mommy!" The triplets scrambled off the leather couch where they'd been sitting with Elliot's assistant, blankets falling away, and launched themselves at Naomi. She dropped to her knees, gathering all 3 into her arms, pressing kisses to their heads, checking them over frantically. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Why did you leave the apartment? You scared me so much." "We were hungry, Mommy," Naya said, "and we knew you were here." "The scary lady was mean to us," Nola added, her voice small. But the nice man stopped her. "He gave us soup," Nessa whispered, still clinging to Naomi's neck. "And blankets, and he was really mad at the scary lady." Naomi looked up at Elliot, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for protecting them." Elliot nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Watching Naomi with the girls, the fierce love in every touch, every word, something inside his chest cracked open. His assistant, sensing the charged atmosphere, quietly excused herself and left the office, closing the door behind her. The girls, exhausted from their ordeal and full of warm food, began to yawn. Naomi settled them on the couch, tucking the blankets around them. Within minutes, all three were asleep, curled against each other like puppies. Only then did Naomi turn to face Elliot. They stood on opposite sides of the office, an acre of expensive carpet between them, and 5 years of silence. "They look like you," Elliot said quietly. "Nia has your smile. Nola has your hands. Nessa has the way you tilt your head when you're thinking." Naomi's breath hitched. "But they have other things too," he continued, moving slowly closer. "Nessa has my eyes, the exact shade. Nia has my mother's chin. Nola has this thing my father used to do. She wrinkles her nose when she laughs." "Elliot, 5 years ago, Naomi. You left 5 years ago. They're 4 years old." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm seeing things that aren't there." Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. When she spoke, her voice was hollow, defeated. "Do you remember the garden?" she asked instead of answering. "The one behind the east wing of your family's estate?" 5 years earlier, the garden at night was Naomi's favorite place. A secret world where the carefully manicured lawns gave way to wild roses and honeysuckle. Where the sounds of the Mangan mansion faded to a distant murmur. She shouldn't have been there. The cleaning staff wasn't supposed to wander the grounds after hours. But after 12-hour days scrubbing floors and polishing silver, she needed air, needed space, needed to remember she was human, and not just invisible hands that cleaned up other people's messes. Couldn't sleep either. She'd spun around to find Elliot Mangan standing in the moonlight. Not the formal businessman she glimpsed occasionally in the halls, but someone softer. Shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed, eyes tired but kind. "Mr. Mangan, I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone else was—" "Elliot, please, and don't apologize. This garden is for everyone." He smiled. "Well, it's supposed to be. Most people ignore it." That was the first night. There had been so many more after that. Conversations that stretched until dawn. His hand finding hers in the darkness. The way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was more than just staff, like she was someone worth knowing. "My family won't understand," he'd told her one night, his forehead pressed against hers. "They have expectations, plans for who I'm supposed to marry, what kind of family I'm supposed to build." "I know," she'd whispered back. "We're being foolish, probably." He'd kissed her then, soft and desperate. "But I don't care." But she'd cared. She'd cared when she started feeling sick in the mornings, cared when the pregnancy test showed positive, cared when she realized there were 3 heartbeats instead of 1. She'd been planning how to tell him when Harrison Mangan, Elliot's father, had called her to his study. "I know what you're doing with my son," the old man had said, not looking up from his paperwork. "I'm not blind, and I'm not heartless either. Here's $20,000, enough for you to disappear. Start over somewhere else. I don't want your money. You should, because if you don't take it and leave quietly, I'll make sure you never work again. Not just in this house, anywhere." He'd finally looked at her then, his eyes cold. "I'll destroy your mother's cleaning business, your sister's scholarship application, your brother's job at the shipping companies. Everyone you love will suffer because you couldn't keep your place. Does Elliot know you're doing this? Elliot will forget you within a month. He's young, infatuated. He'll move on to someone appropriate." Harrison had slid the envelope across the desk. "Take the money, disappear, or I'll destroy everyone you care about." She'd taken the money. God help her, she'd taken it and run. "I was weak," Naomi said, pulling herself back to the present. "I should have told you, should have fought harder. But I was terrified of what your father would do to my family. And I was pregnant. And I didn't know how to—" Her voice broke. Elliot stared at her, processing. "My father paid you to leave? Threatened me. The money was just insurance." She laughed bitterly. "It ran out within a year anyway. Triplets are expensive." "Jesus! Naomi!" Elliot ran his hands through his hair. "I looked for you everywhere. I thought maybe you'd died, or something terrible had happened. My father told me you'd run off with some man, that you'd gotten what you wanted from us, and left." "Of course he did. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack." Elliot's voice was flat. "I never knew. He never told me." They stood in silence, the weight of 5 years of lies settling between them. Finally, Elliot crossed the distance between them. He stopped just inches away, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to smell the laundry detergent on her clothes, and something underneath. Something that was purely, achingly Naomi. His voice, when he spoke, was barely a whisper, rough with emotion, trembling with hope and fear and desperate need to know. "Naomi, are they mine?" The question hung in the air between them like a living thing, fragile and dangerous. Naomi's eyes filled with fresh tears, and for a long moment she simply looked at him, really looked at him, as if memorizing his face all over again. "Yes," the word came out as barely a breath. "Yes, Elliot, they're yours. They've always been yours." Elliot felt his knees go weak. He reached out blindly, gripping the edge of his desk for support. 5 years. 5 years of not knowing he had children. 5 years of these beautiful girls growing up without him. 5 years of Naomi struggling alone with a secret that should have been shared. "Well?" His voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me? Even after my father died, you could have—" "I tried." Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold the pieces together. "Not right away, but later. About a year ago, when things got really desperate, I called your office. I never got any message from you." "I know." Her laugh was hollow. "I got as far as your executive assistant. She asked my name, what company I was calling from. When I said that we'd known each other years ago, she told me you were in meetings all day. To send an email." Elliot's jaw clenched. "You should have sent one." "I did. 3 times. They all bounced back with an automatic reply about spam filters." She met his eyes. "You're a billionaire, Elliot. You have layers of protection between you and the world. I'm nobody. A cleaner. Do you know how many people probably try to contact you every day, claiming to have some connection to you? Some story? Some angle? He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. His assistant fielded hundreds of messages a day, people wanting money, opportunities, claiming old friendships, making demands. He'd built those walls deliberately, and now he was facing the consequences. "You still should have tried harder," he said. But the anger was fading, replaced by a crushing weight of regret. Or, he stopped, his mind catching on something she'd said earlier. "Wait, you said my father threatened you, but you also mentioned someone else. When you came to work here 8 months ago, who hired you?" Naomi's face went even paler. "I didn't realize the connection at first. Not until I'd already been working here for a few weeks. The hiring manager was Marcus Parsons." "Parsons?" Elliot's eyes narrowed. "Cynthia's brother?" "Yeah?" Naomi's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He's the one who contacted me 5 years ago, right after I left your estate. He found me at my mother's house in Brooklyn, said your father had sent him to check on me, to make sure I understood the terms of our arrangement." "What did he say to you?" Naomi flinched at the memory. "He told me that if I ever tried to contact you, if I ever claimed the babies were yours, he'd make sure I was exposed as a gold digger. He said your father had already prepared evidence, fake emails I supposedly sent, demanding money, photos that could be interpreted as me trying to seduce you for your wealth." She hugged herself tighter. "He said no one would believe a maid over a mangan, that you'd destroy me in court if I tried to claim child support." Jesus Christ! Elliot's hands curled into fists. "Marcus Parsons works in my acquisitions department, junior executive level. I barely know him. He knew you, though, or thought he did. He was convinced I was trying to trap you, that the pregnancy was some elaborate scheme." Naomi's voice hardened slightly. "When I applied for the cleaning position here 8 months ago, I didn't make the connection to Cynthia at first. Different last name before she married, and I'd never met her. But Marcus recognized me immediately when I came in for the interview. He hired you anyway? He seemed to enjoy it, actually, having me there, working in the basement, knowing I was so close to you, but completely out of reach." Her voice dropped. "He told me on my first day, 'Don't get any ideas about going upstairs. Mr. Mangan doesn't remember women like you.' And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? You'd moved on, built an empire. You probably had a different woman every week." "There's been no one." The words came out before Elliot could stop them. "Not really. Not since you." Naomi's eyes snapped to his, surprise and something else, hope, maybe, flickering across her face. But before either could speak, a soft sound came from the couch. Nessa was stirring, her small face scrunching as she dreamed. They both went quiet, watching the 3 girls sleep. The silence was heavy, with everything unsaid, everything lost. "They're beautiful," Elliot finally whispered. "Smart. Brave. You did an incredible job raising them alone." "I had no choice." But there was no accusation in Naomi's voice now, just exhaustion. "And I didn't do it alone, not entirely. My mother helped when she could, my sister sometimes. But it's been hard, Elliot, so hard. 3 kids on a cleaner's salary? We've been living in a studio apartment in the Bronx. The girls sleep on a pull-out couch. We eat pasta 3 meals a day sometimes. I work 16-hour shifts when I can get them, trying to save enough to move somewhere bigger, somewhere safer." Each word was like a knife to Elliot's chest. While he'd been living in a penthouse, eating at five-star restaurants, traveling the world for business. His daughters had been sleeping on a couch, eating pasta every day, growing up in a cramped apartment. That ends now. His voice was firm, decisive, all of it. I'm going to fix this. Elliot, I'm not asking you for... I know you're not. But they're my daughters. Mine. He said it with wonder, testing the words on his tongue. I have daughters. 3 of them. And you... He paused, meeting her eyes. You're the mother of my children. That means something. That means everything. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to take responsibility. Full responsibility. Elliot's mind was already racing, planning. You'll move out of that apartment immediately. I own a building on the Upper West Side, 3-bedroom units, safe neighborhood, good schools nearby. You and the girls can have your choice of apartments, rent-free. Elliot, that's too much. It's not nearly enough. He moved closer, his voice urgent. And you're not cleaning toilets anymore. I'll create a position for you. Administrative work, program coordination, something that uses your brain and pays you what you deserve. The girls will have everything they need. Medical care, clothes, education, activities, everything. Naomi shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks again. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Because they deserve it. Because you deserve it. He hesitated, then added softly, because 5 years ago, I loved you, and I never stopped. Not really. The confession hung in the air between them. Naomi's breath caught. Elliot! A sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Elliot's assistant poked her head in, her expression apologetic. Sir, I'm sorry, but there's a situation. Cynthia Parsons refused to leave the building. Security had to escort her out. She was making a scene in the lobby, shouting about wrongful termination and discrimination. Elliot's jaw tightened. Let her shout. My lawyers will handle it. Did security ban her from the premises? Yes, sir, but she was taking photos as they removed her. Of the building, the employees, she seemed very... The assistant searched for the right word. Vindictive. Thank you, Helen. That's all for now. As Helen left, closing the door behind her, a cold feeling settled in Elliot's stomach. Cynthia Parsons. Marcus Parsons. The brother-sister duo had been there at the beginning of this nightmare 5 years ago, and now they were circling again like vultures. Her brother must have told her about me, Naomi said quietly, reading his expression. About the babies. He probably told her everything. Which means she knows the girls are mine. Elliot ran a hand through his hair. And she just got fired. Publicly humiliated by the CEO. She's going to want revenge. What can she do? I don't know. But people like Cynthia, people who measure their worth by how much power they have over others, they don't go quietly. He looked at the sleeping triplets. We need to be careful. 15 floors below, Cynthia Parsons sat in her Mercedes in the parking garage, her hands shaking with rage. Her personal belongings sat in a cardboard box on the passenger seat. 8 years of her life reduced to a few framed certificates and a coffee mug. Fired. She'd been fired. In front of employees. In front of those filthy children and their whore mother. All because Elliot Mangan had some savior complex. She'd called Marcus immediately, her voice shrill with fury. Did you know? Did you know those brats were Naomi Carter's? Of course I knew. Marcus's voice had been cold, calculating. I'm the one who hired her. Thought it would be amusing, having her so close to Elliot without him knowing. A little joke between me and the universe. Well, your joke just cost me my career. Cynthia had nearly screamed. Elliot recognized her. Or recognized the kids. He's probably up there right now, playing happy family with the gold digger and her little welfare queens. Interesting. Marcus had paused. You know what else is interesting? Elliot Mangan, family values businessman, pillar of the corporate community, has 3 secret illegitimate children with a former maid. The media would eat that up. Cynthia's rage had slowly crystallized into something sharper, more focused. They would, wouldn't they? Especially if the story came with photos, evidence. Maybe a concerned former employee who witnessed the CEO's inappropriate relationship with staff members. I could ruin him. We could ruin him, Marcus corrected. Dad always said the Mangans thought they were better than everyone else. Time to knock them down a peg. Now, sitting alone in her car, Cynthia scrolled through her phone contacts. She had connections, lots of them. Society pages, gossip blogs, tabloid journalists who owed her favors. Her finger hovered over one name in particular. Derek Sampson, senior writer at Manhattan Insider, the city's most vicious gossip publication. They'd dated briefly a year ago. It had ended badly, but Derek was always hungry for a story. She typed quickly, her thumbs flying across the screen. You want a story about a CEO and 3 secret kids? I've got one. Elliot Mangan. Illegitimate triplets with his cleaning lady. He's been hiding them for years. I have photos, testimony, everything. Interested? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came within 30 seconds. Very interested. Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything. Cynthia smiled, cold and sharp as broken glass. Elliot Mangan thought he could humiliate her? Thought he could throw her away like garbage over some brats who had no business in his pristine executive kitchen? He was about to learn what happened when you made an enemy of Cynthia Parsons. She took one last photo. The Magnon corporate tower rising into the stormy sky, its windows glowing like golden eyes, and captioned it. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Then she started her car and drove away into the darkness, already planning her revenge. Back in Elliot's office, he was making calls to his lawyer, to his real estate manager, to his accountant, setting things in motion, building a life for his daughters, even if he'd missed the first 4 years. Naomi sat watching him, 1,000 emotions playing across her face. Relief, fear, hope, guilt. When he finally hung up and turned back to her, she said softly, You don't have to do all this. I can still. Yes, I do. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. They were rough from years of cleaning solutions and hard work. He held them gently, like they were precious. I missed 4 years, Naomi. 4 years of birthdays and first words and first steps. I can't get that back. But I can make sure the next 4 years, and the 40 after that, are different. What if this gets complicated? It's already complicated. He smiled slightly. But they're worth it. You're worth it. Naomi opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Nessa stirred on the couch, her small voice sleepy and confused. Mommy? Where are we? Naomi went to her immediately, gathering her close. We're safe, baby. Mommy's here. Elliot watched them. His daughter. His... whatever Naomi was now. The woman who'd held his heart for 5 years without him even knowing. The mother of his children. And somewhere in the darkness of the city, Someone was already planning to tear it all apart. But for now, in this moment, in his office high above Manhattan, Elliot Mangan looked at his family and felt complete for the first time in 5 years. 2 days, that's all the peace they got. 2 days of Elliot helping Naomi pack up the cramped Bronx apartment of the Triplets running through the spacious Upper West Side unit he'd secured for them, their laughter echoing off walls that actually had space between them. 2 days of tentative smiles and careful conversations, of rebuilding something that had been shattered 5 years ago. 2 days before everything exploded. Elliot was in his morning meeting with the executive board when his phone started buzzing incessantly. Then, Helen burst through the conference room door, something she never did, her face pale, a tablet clutched in her shaking hands. "Sir, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this. Right now." She placed the tablet on the table in front of him. The headline screamed across the screen in bold, black letters, "Billionaire CEO keeps his maid's illegitimate triplets in secret office quarters." Below it, a photo, Elliot kneeling beside 3 small girls in his office, blankets around their shoulders. The angle made it look clandestine, inappropriate. Another photo showed Naomi in her cleaning uniform entering Magnon Tower. A third captured him escorting her and the children out of the building, his hand on her back, in what the caption called an intimate gesture. The byline read, "Derek Sampson, Manhattan Insider. Exclusive investigation." Elliot's blood ran cold as he scrolled through the article. Sources close to Magnon Corporate reveal that CEO Elliot Mangan, 35, has been secretly housing his former maid and their 3 illegitimate children in company facilities. Naomi Carter, 28, worked at the Mangan family estate 5 years ago before mysteriously disappearing. She recently returned as a cleaning staff member at Magnon Tower, where insiders say Mangan has been providing her with special accommodations in exchange for undisclosed favors. The triplets, aged 4, were allegedly kept hidden in executive areas of the building, away from other employees. "He was very protective of them," says a former supervisor who wished to remain anonymous. "No one was allowed near them. It was very secretive, very inappropriate." Questions are now being raised about workplace ethics, abuse of power, and whether company resources were used for Mangan's personal affairs. Investors are reportedly demanding answers. The words blurred together. Elliot felt the eyes of every board member on him, judging, calculating, wondering if the man at the head of the table was a liability. "Is it true?" Marcus Chen, the CFO, asked carefully. "About the children?" "The children are mine, yes." Elliot's voice was steady despite the rage building in his chest. "But everything else in this article is a deliberate lie. I didn't know they existed until 2 days ago when they came to the building looking for their mother during a storm. I'm taking responsibility for them now. That's all anyone needs to know." "That's not all the media needs to know," interjected Patricia Wilkes, head of PR, her voice tight with panic. "Sir, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. Every major outlet wants a statement. The company stock dropped 3% in the last hour. We need to manage this now." "Then manage it." Elliot stood, gathering his things. "Tell them the truth. I have 3 daughters I didn't know about. I'm doing right by them and their mother. That's the story." "With respect, sir," Patricia said, her tone suggesting she had very little respect at the moment. "It's not that simple. The article implies abuse of power, misuse of company resources, inappropriate relationships with subordinate staff. If we don't control this narrative—" "I said manage it." Elliot's voice cut through the room like steel. "I have to go. My family needs me." He was out the door, before anyone could protest, Helen scrambling to keep up behind him. 24 hours earlier. Cynthia Parsons sat across from Derek Sampson in a dimly lit corner booth of a midtown restaurant. Between them lay a manila folder stuffed with printed emails, photos, and handwritten notes. "This is gold, Cynthia." Derek flipped through the contents, his eyes gleaming. "But I need you on record, as a source." "Anonymous source," Cynthia corrected, sipping her wine. "I'm not stupid. I'll give you everything you need, testimony, context, details, but my name stays out of it. You realize he could sue for defamation if we get this wrong. You won't get it wrong, because it's all true." Cynthia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Elliot Mangan has been playing savior with his little maid and her bastard children, using company facilities like his personal charity. He fired me for trying to maintain professional standards. Now it's time someone exposed him for what he really is, a hypocrite who preaches corporate ethics while screwing the help." Derek grinned. "When you put it that way," he signaled for another round of drinks. "Give me 24 hours. This story runs tomorrow morning. Front page, digital, and print." "Make it hurt," Cynthia said, raising her glass. "Make sure everyone knows what kind of man Elliot Mangan really is." They clinked glasses, and Cynthia smiled, the satisfied smile of someone watching their enemy's world burn. By the time Elliot reached the Bronx apartment, they hadn't finished moving yet, a crowd had already gathered. News vans lined the street. Photographers with long lenses clustered on the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering or leaving the building. Elliot's driver had to push through the crowd to reach the entrance. Camera flashes exploded in his face. Microphones were shoved toward him. "Mr. Mangan, is it true you've been hiding your children? Did you abuse your position of power with Naomi Carter? Are you paying her to keep quiet? How long has this affair been going on?" Elliot kept his head down, his jaw clenched, and forced his way through. A security guard he'd hired that morning opened the door, and Elliot took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. He found Naomi trying to calm 3 hysterical children, while a photographer with a telephoto lens aimed his camera through the window from a building across the street. The girls were crying, clutching their mother, terrified by the chaos. "Mommy, why are those people taking pictures?" Nessa sobbed. "Why are they yelling?" "Are we in trouble?" Nia asked, her voice small and scared. Elliot crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the curtains shut, his hands shaking with fury. Then he knelt beside the girls. "You're not in trouble. None of you. Those people out there, they're confused. They don't understand what's really happening. But I promise you, I'm going to fix this." Naomi looked at him, her eyes red from crying. "Elliot, they called me. From your company. They said my employment is suspended pending an investigation into workplace misconduct. They made it sound like I know. I saw the article." He stood, pulling out his phone. "Pack a bag, all of you. You're coming to my penthouse. Now. We're not staying here." "Elliot, that'll just make it worse. The optics? I don't give a damn about optics." His voice was fierce. "There are photographers outside your window, Naomi. Reporters harassing your neighbors. The girls are terrified. You think I'm leaving you here to deal with this alone?" Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Okay, we'll come." They packed quickly. Clothes, toys, the few precious belongings the girls couldn't live without. Elliot called down to his driver to pull around back. He called his head of security to arrange an escort. He called his lawyer and barked instructions about cease and desist letters and defamation suits. The escape from the building was harrowing. Even using the back entrance, they were spotted. Reporters ran after the car, shouting questions. Cameras captured everything. By the time they reached Elliot's building in Tribeca, with its private garage and security protocols, all four of them were shaking. The penthouse was a different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River. The space was modern, minimalist, expensive, and utterly silent after the chaos of the streets. The triplets stood in the entrance, holding hands, their eyes wide. Is this where you live?" Nola whispered. "It is," Elliot said gently. "And for now, it's where you live too. You're safe here. I promise." The first night was strange and tender and surreal. Elliot ordered dinner from a restaurant that didn't require them to brave the outside world. Pasta, because Naomi mentioned it was the girls' favorite, and chicken fingers, and vegetables they probably wouldn't eat, but he felt obligated to try. They ate on the floor of the living room because the formal dining table felt too stiff, too adult. The girls slowly relaxed, their fear giving way to curiosity about this new space. After dinner, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the day, Nessa crawled into Elliot's lap while he sat on the couch. She didn't say anything, just curled against his chest like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Elliot froze, overwhelmed by the small weight of her, the trust in that simple gesture. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around her. "You're warm," she murmured sleepily. "So are you, sweetheart." Across the room, Naomi watched them, something unreadable in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret, or hope. When the girls finally fell asleep, all three piled together on the guest bed, tangled in blankets and stuffed animals, Elliot and Naomi stood in the doorway, watching them. "I'm sorry," Naomi whispered. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't come back, if I'd just stayed away, then I never would have known them." Elliot's voice was firm. "And they'd still be struggling." "No, Naomi. This isn't your fault. It's Cynthia Parsons and her brother, and every other person who thought they had the right to control our lives. The article made us sound so... I know what it made us sound like. It's a lie. Anyone who matters will see that." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. The next few days blurred together. Elliot worked from home, fielding calls from lawyers and PR teams, and increasingly nervous board members. The stock continued to drop. 2 major clients put their contracts under review. A petition started circulating online, calling for his resignation. But inside the penthouse, a different story unfolded. Elliot learned that Nia liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares, that Nola hummed when she colored, that Nessa had nightmares and needed a nightlight. He read them stories before bed, fairy tales about princesses and dragons, adventure stories about pirates and treasure. The girls would curl up on either side of him, their small bodies warm and trusting, and Elliot would feel his throat tighten with emotion. One evening, as he finished a story about a lost princess finding her way home, Nessa looked up at him with those eyes, his eyes, and asked, "Are you our daddy?" The room went silent. Naomi, who had been watching from the doorway, held her breath. Elliot set the book down carefully. "Yes," he said softly. "I am. I didn't know about you before, but now that I do, yes, I'm your daddy." "Good," Nessa said simply, and laid her head on his shoulder. "I like having a daddy." Nia and Nola exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. "We like it too," Nia said. Elliot had to excuse himself to the bathroom, where he stood with his hands braced on the sink, trying to steady his breathing, trying to process the overwhelming reality of having a family he'd never expected. When he emerged, Naomi was waiting in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting them, for everything. You don't have to thank me. They're my daughters." "I know, but—" She paused, searching for words. "5 years ago, we were so careful to hide what we felt, to pretend it didn't matter. And now here we are, living together, raising children together, and I don't know what we are anymore." "We're a family," Elliot said simply. "However complicated, whatever form it takes, we're a family. That's what matters." Naomi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Before either of them could say more, the doorbell rang. They both froze. It was nearly 9 p.m. No one should be at the penthouse. Security hadn't called up. Elliot checked the video monitor by the door. 2 people stood in the hallway, a man and a woman in business casual attire, holding official-looking folders and identification badges. His blood went cold. "Who is it?" Naomi whispered. Elliot turned to her, his face grim. "Child Protective Services." The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. And through the door, a voice called out, "Mr. Mangan, Ms. Carter, we need to speak with you. It's regarding the welfare of the 3 minors currently residing at this address." Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. Behind them, the sound of small footsteps. The girls, drawn by the voices, standing in the hallway in their pajamas. "Mommy?" Naya's voice was uncertain. "Who's at the door?" Elliot looked at Naomi, at his daughters, at the fragile peace they'd built over the past few days, and he knew with absolute certainty, that their nightmare was just beginning. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The woman from Child Protective Services was in her mid-40s, with kind eyes that didn't match the bureaucratic coldness of her clipboard. Her partner, younger and male, stood slightly behind her, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm Linda Morrison, and this is Officer James Chen from CPS," the woman said, holding up her badge. "We received a complaint regarding the welfare of 3 minor children at this address. We need to conduct an immediate welfare check and interview all parties involved." Elliot felt Naomi's hand grip his arm, her fingers trembling. Behind them, the triplets huddled together, sensing the tension. "It's late," Elliot said, keeping his voice measured. "The children are about to go to bed. Can't this wait until morning?" "I'm afraid not, Mr. Mangan. When allegations of this nature are made, we're required to act immediately." Linda's eyes softened slightly. "I understand this is difficult, but we need to ensure the children's safety. May we come in?" Elliot wanted to refuse, wanted to slam the door and protect his daughters from whatever was about to happen, but he knew that would only make things worse. Slowly, he stepped aside. The CPS workers entered, their eyes sweeping the penthouse, taking in the expensive furniture, the toys scattered across the floor, the half-eaten bowls of ice cream on the coffee table. Evidence of a life interrupted. "Girls," Naomi said, her voice shaking as she knelt before them. "These people need to talk to Mommy and Elliot for a little while. Can you go to your room and play quietly?" "We don't want to," Nessa whispered, clinging to Naomi's leg. "We want to stay with you. I know, baby. But Mommy needs you to be brave right now. Can you do that for me?" Reluctantly, the triplets shuffled toward the guest room they'd been sharing, looking back over their shoulders with frightened eyes. "Let's start with you, Ms. Carter," Linda said, once the children were out of earshot. "Officer Chen will speak with Mr. Mangan separately. Standard protocol." The interviews were clinical, invasive. They were separated into different rooms, Elliot in his home office, Naomi in the kitchen. Through the walls, he could hear the murmur of voices, but couldn't make out words. Linda Morrison sat across from Naomi, her pen poised over official forms. "How long have you been living at this address?" "3 days," Naomi answered, her hands twisting in her lap. "Before that, we lived in the Bronx, a studio apartment." "And what is your relationship with Mr. Mangan?" He's the father of my children." "When did he acknowledge paternity?" 3 days ago. He didn't know about them before. I left before I could tell him I was pregnant." Linda made a note. "And why did you leave?" Naomi hesitated. How could she explain 5 years of fear and shame in a way that made sense? "His father threatened me, paid me to disappear. I was scared." "But you came back. You took a job at Mr. Mangan's company." "I needed work. I didn't know if he'd even remember me." It had been 5 years. "And when did your relationship with Mr. Mangan become intimate again?" Naomi's head snapped up. "It didn't. We're not." She stumbled over the words. "We're just trying to figure out how to co-parent, that's all." But even as she said it, she could see the doubt in Linda's eyes, the skepticism. A former maid and a billionaire, now living together with 3 children? The implications were obvious, even if they weren't true. In the office, Elliot faced similar questions from Officer Chen. "When did you become aware that the children were yours?" 3 days ago. They came to my office building during a storm, looking for their mother. I recognized Naomi immediately. "And you invited them to live with you?" "The media was harassing them. Photographers were outside their apartment, terrifying my daughters. I brought them here to protect them." "Your daughters?" Chen repeated, making a note. "Yet you've known them less than a week." "Biology doesn't require a waiting period, officer." Elliot's voice was tight. "They're mine. DNA will confirm it if needed." "Has a paternity test been conducted?" "Not yet, but I'm willing to take one immediately." "And your relationship with Ms. Carter, is it sexual in nature?" Elliot's jaw clenched. "No, we were involved 5 years ago, before she became pregnant. We've barely spoken since she returned. This arrangement is purely about the children's welfare." Chen studied him, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Mangan, I'm going to be direct with you. We've received documentation suggesting a pattern of inappropriate behavior. Emails indicating you were pressuring Ms. Carter for sexual favors in exchange for employment. Photos showing the children in your office at unusual hours. Testimony from a former employee stating you kept the relationship and the children hidden from your company." "That's all lies." Elliot's voice was deadly calm. "Manufactured by someone with an agenda. Can you prove that?" "Can you prove it's real?" Elliot shot back. "Anyone can fake an email. Anyone can take a photo out of context. Did your source happen to mention that I fired her 2 days before this complaint was filed? That she has every reason to want revenge?" Chen's pen paused. "We're required to investigate all credible allegations." "Credible?" Elliot stood, his control slipping. "You want credible? My daughters were forced to lick a floor by that woman. They were cold and hungry and scared, and I protected them. That's the truth. Everything else is fiction designed to hurt us." After an hour of questions, Linda and Officer Chen convened in the living room. Elliot and Naomi stood together, Naomi's arms wrapped around herself, Elliot's hands clenched into fists. "We need to see the children," Linda said gently. "Speak with them alone." "They're 4 years old," Naomi protested, her voice breaking. "They won't understand these questions. You'll scare them." "We'll be as gentle as possible, but we need to hear from them directly." The girls were brought out, confused and frightened. They sat on the couch, holding hands in their pajamas, while Linda knelt before them with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, sweethearts. My name is Linda. I just want to ask you some questions, okay? Are you happy living here?" 3 small heads nodded. "Do Mommy and Elliot ever fight?" They shook their heads. "Has anyone ever hurt you, touched you in a way that felt wrong?" "No," Naya said firmly. "Elliot reads us stories, and he makes funny voices for all the characters." "He's nice," Nola added. "He bought us new toys." "He's our daddy," Nessa whispered, as if it were a secret. Linda made notes, her expression softening slightly, but when she stood and returned to confer with Officer Chen, Elliot knew. He knew by the way they looked at each other, by the official forms they were pulling from their folders. "I'm sorry," Linda said, turning back to face them. "But based on the evidence we've reviewed and the circumstances of this case, we have no choice but to recommend temporary removal of the children pending a full investigation." The words hit like a physical blow. Naomi made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "No," Elliot said, stepping forward. "No, you can't do this. They're safe here. They're happy here. I understand this is difficult, Mr. Mangan, but we have documentation suggesting an unstable environment. The media attention alone poses a risk to their well-being. Until we can verify what? That I'm their father? I'll take a DNA test right now. Tonight. It's not just about paternity. It's about the appropriateness of the living situation, the sudden change in circumstances, the allegations of coercion." "What allegations?" Naomi's voice was shrill now, desperate. "Who's making these allegations?" Linda exchanged a glance with Chen. The complaint was filed anonymously, but it included substantial documentation. Photos, emails, testimony from Cynthia Parsons, Elliot cut in. "It's all from her. She's lying. She's making this up because I fired her for abusing my children." "That may be, Mr. Mangan, but we're legally required to investigate. The children will be placed in temporary foster care." "No!" Naomi's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, her hands clutching at Linda's sleeve. "Please, please don't take my babies. They're all I have. They're everything. Please." The sound of her anguish brought the triplets running from the couch. They threw themselves at Naomi, all 3 crying now, not understanding what was happening, but knowing it was bad. "Mommy, don't cry," Naya sobbed. "We'll be good. We promise." "Please, don't send us away," Nola begged. Nessa just clung to Naomi's neck, her small body shaking with silent tears. Elliot stood frozen, watching his family break apart, feeling utterly, completely powerless for the first time in his adult life. He could buy companies, could command boardrooms, could move millions with a phone call, but he couldn't stop this. "How long?" His voice was hoarse. "How long will they be gone?" "That depends on the investigation," Chen said, not unkindly. "Could be days, could be weeks. We'll try to expedite." "Weeks?" Naomi's voice was barely human. "You're taking my children for weeks?" "We'll arrange visitation. Supervised, of course. But, Miss Carter, you have to understand, given the circumstances, given the allegations—" "I've done nothing wrong!" Naomi screamed, her composure finally shattering. "I've worked 3 jobs to keep them fed and clothed and safe. I've sacrificed everything for them. And you're taking them away because some vindictive woman told lies?" But the system didn't care about sacrifice, didn't care about love. It cared about procedures and protocols and covering institutional liability. A third worker arrived, a woman who specialized in child transport. She had gentle hands and sad eyes, and a bag of toys meant to distract traumatized children. "Girls," Linda said softly, kneeling again, "you're going to take a little trip, just for a few days. You'll stay with a nice family who takes care of children, and you'll see Mommy and Daddy very soon." "No!" Nessa's scream was piercing. "No, no, no! I want Mommy!" All three girls were sobbing now, clinging to Naomi with desperate strength. The transport worker had to physically pry their fingers away, one by one, while Naomi collapsed against Elliot. Her body racked with sobs so violent he thought she might break. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair, his own tears falling freely now. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I promise, I'll fix this." But as he watched his daughters being carried out of the penthouse, still screaming for their mother, their small hands reaching back toward them, he wondered if some things were too broken to fix. The silence after they left was deafening. Naomi couldn't stand, couldn't speak. She just sat on the floor where she'd fallen, staring at the spot where her daughters had been, tears streaming down her face. Elliot sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, feeling the tremors that racked her body. Outside, the city glittered with indifferent lights. People were going about their lives, eating dinner, watching television, making love, while his world had just ended. His phone buzzed. Then again and again, messages flooding in. He ignored them all except one, from his lawyer, Richard Stone. "I'm looking into the CPS complaint. The documentation they received was very sophisticated. This wasn't amateur work. I'm pulling all digital records from Cynthia Parsons's company accounts. If she faked those emails, there will be traces." Elliot texted back with shaking hands. "Work faster. My daughters are in a state facility tonight because of her lies. I know. I'm sorry. I'll call you in the morning with an update." Morning. His daughters would wake up in a strange place, surrounded by strangers, wondering why their mother had let them be taken away. "This is my fault," Naomi whispered, her voice raw. "If I'd never come back. If I'd just stayed away." "Stop!" Elliot turned her face toward his, forcing her to look at him. "This is not your fault. This is Cynthia's fault, and her brother's fault, and my father's fault for starting this nightmare 5 years ago. But not yours. Never yours. They're so scared. They don't understand." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Nessa can't sleep without her purple elephant. Nola needs a nightlight. Naya has to have her blanket tucked in just right, or she has nightmares. "I know." Elliot pulled her closer, his own chest tight with grief. "We'll get them back. I swear to you, we'll get them back." But even as he made the promise, he didn't know if he could keep it. 3 miles away, in a temporary care facility in Queens, 3 small girls sat together on a twin bed in a room painted cheerful yellow. The walls were covered with cartoon characters meant to soothe, but nothing could soothe the ache of being ripped from the only security they'd ever known. "I want Mommy," Nessa whimpered, clutching a teddy bear that wasn't hers, that didn't smell right, that wasn't the purple elephant she needed. "Me too," Nola whispered, her thumb in her mouth, a habit she'd broken months ago. Naya, the eldest by 3 minutes and the bravest by necessity, held her sisters close. "Mommy will come get us. And Elliot, too. They promised." "But when?" Nessa asked. Naya didn't have an answer. A care worker, A kind woman named Sarah, who'd seen too many children pass through these doors, knocked softly before entering. "Girls, I know this is hard, but I brought you something." She held out 3 small frames. Inside each was a photo, the one Elliot's assistant had snapped 2 days ago without anyone noticing. All 5 of them on the penthouse floor, eating ice cream, laughing. A family. "The man, your daddy, he called and asked me to make sure you had these," Sarah said gently, placing the frames on the nightstand. "He wanted you to know he's thinking about you." The triplets stared at the photos, their small fingers tracing the faces. "He'll come get us?" Nessa asked, her voice small. "Everyone's working very hard to make that happen," Sarah said, which wasn't quite a yes, but was all she could offer. When she left, the girls curled together under the thin institutional blanket, clutching their photos like lifelines, and cried themselves to sleep. At 2 a.m., Elliot's phone rang. His lawyer, Richard Stone, despite the hour. "I found something," Richard said without preamble. "The emails that were submitted to CPS, they were fabricated. Cynthia used a sophisticated spoofing service, but she got sloppy. There are metadata inconsistencies, IP address discrepancies. It's fake, and I can prove it." Elliot sat up, his heart pounding. "How long to build a case? If I work around the clock? 3 days? Maybe 4. "Make it 2. Elliot's voice was steel. "My daughters have been away from their mother for 6 hours, and it's already destroying her. Every day matters." "I'll do my best. But Elliot, there's something else. I dug into Cynthia's employment history looking for any other complaints, any pattern of misconduct. And she had a formal complaint filed against her 3 years ago. Workplace harassment. Abuse of power. It was settled quietly with an NDA, so it never went public. But the person who filed it still works at Magnon." "Who?" "Martha Lane. She was a senior housekeeper at your family estate before transferring to Magnon Tower. She retired 6 months ago, but she lives upstate. And Elliot, she worked at the estate the same time Naomi did. If anyone knows what really happened 5 years ago, it's her." Elliot was already reaching for his laptop, pulling up his company's HR archives. "Send me her contact information. Everything you have. Already in your inbox." Elliot opened the email, staring at the name and address that might hold the key to everything. Martha Lane, 247 Riverside Road, Beacon, New York. A 2-hour drive. He could leave now, be there by dawn. He looked toward the bedroom where Naomi had finally cried herself into an exhausted sleep. He couldn't leave her. Not tonight. Not after what she'd been through. But tomorrow, he would find Martha Lane. And he would get the truth that would bring his daughters home. Dawn broke gray and cold over the Hudson Valley as Elliot's car wound through the hills toward Beacon. He'd left at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to sit still while his daughters spent another night away from home. Naomi had still been sleeping, or pretending to sleep, when he'd slipped out, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to find answers. Back by afternoon. We're going to win this. The GPS led him to a modest Cape Cod house on a tree-lined street. The lawn was meticulously maintained, the flower beds still showing the last stubborn blooms of fall. A woman in her early 60s was kneeling by the porch steps, pulling weeds from around a patch of chrysanthemums. She looked up as Elliot's car pulled into the driveway, her weathered face showing confusion, then recognition, then something harder to read. "Mr. Mangan?" She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her gardening gloves. "I wondered if you'd find me eventually." "Martha Lane?" Elliot stepped out of the car, his body stiff from the drive and the sleepless night. I need to talk to you about Naomi Carter, and about what happened at my family's estate 5 years ago." Martha studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes sharp despite her age. Then she sighed. "I suppose you'd better come inside. This conversation requires coffee." The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of fresh bread. Martha poured 2 mugs of coffee and settled across from Elliot at a worn wooden table. Through the window, morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns on the floor. "I've been following the news," Martha said quietly. "The articles about you and Naomi. Those poor babies being taken away. I almost called you a dozen times. But—" she wrapped her hands around her mug. "I signed an NDA when I left Magnan. Cynthia Parsons made sure of that. She didn't want me talking about what I knew." "About her harassment complaint?" "That, and other things." Martha met his eyes. "Things about your father, about Marcus Parsons, about what they did to Naomi." Elliot leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Martha took a slow breath, as if gathering courage. "I started working at the Mangan estate 30 years ago. Watched you grow up, Mr. Mangan. Saw you become a good man despite your father." She paused. "When Naomi was hired 5 years ago, I took her under my wing. She was smart, hard-working. Too smart for cleaning, really, but she needed the job." "I remember," Elliot said softly. "She used to read in the library during her breaks. Philosophy, history, poetry." "You noticed her. Everyone on staff could see it." Martha's expression softened slightly. "The way you'd find excuses to be wherever she was working. The late-night walks in the garden. We all knew, Mr. Mangan. We kept your secret because we liked you both. Then what happened?" "Your father found out." Martha's voice hardened. "Harrison Mangan didn't miss much. He called Naomi to his study one afternoon. I was cleaning the hallway outside. I heard enough. He told her she was a gold digger, that she'd planned this relationship to trap you, that he'd make sure she never worked anywhere again if she didn't leave immediately." Elliot's hands clenched around his mug. "He told me she ran off with another man, that she'd been using me." "Of course he did, but that's not the worst of it." Martha stood, crossing to a cabinet above the refrigerator. She pulled out a large manila envelope, the kind that had clearly been hidden for years. "After Naomi left, I found something. She'd filed an internal complaint 3 days before she disappeared. Not about your father. She was too scared to do that. But about Marcus Parsons." "Cynthia's brother?" Elliot took the envelope, his heart pounding. "What did he do?" "He cornered her in the basement laundry room 2 weeks before she left. Told her he knew about you two. Said if she didn't end the relationship, he'd make sure everyone knew she was trying to trap the boss's son." Martha's expression was grim. "He grabbed her, Mr. Mangan, put his hands on her, told her that maids like her should know their place." Rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through Elliot. "She filed a complaint and no one did anything?" "Oh, something was done. Marcus's father, Victor Parsons, was on your father's board of directors. Old money, old connections. When Harrison found out about the complaint, he buried it, had it removed from the official HR files. Then he had Victor's son promoted to a position in your company as a gesture of goodwill between business partners. He promoted the man who assaulted Naomi." Elliot's voice was barely above a whisper. "And paid her to disappear so she couldn't cause problems." Martha opened the envelope, spreading papers across the table. "I made copies before they scrubbed the records. The original complaint, in Naomi's handwriting. The witness statement from another maid who heard Marcus threatening her. the HR intake form that mysteriously vanished from the files 3 days later. Elliot stared at the documents, his hands shaking as he read Naomi's neat handwriting describing the assault, the threats, the fear. At the bottom of the complaint, a date. 3 days before she had disappeared from his life. "She tried to report it," he said numbly. "She tried to do the right thing. And my father, your father protected his business interests over a young woman's safety. I'm sorry, Mr. Mangan. I know he was your father. But he was not a good man." Elliot closed his eyes, grief and rage warring inside him. His father had destroyed Naomi's life, had kept him from his daughters, had built this entire nightmare because he cared more about appearances and business connections than human decency. "Why didn't you come forward with this before?" His voice was rough. "When Naomi left, when she was pregnant and alone." "I didn't know she was pregnant. None of us did." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "She hid it well, and she was gone so fast. By the time I realized what must have happened, it was too late. She'd vanished completely. And She swallowed hard. "I was a coward. I had my own family to support, my own job to protect. The Parsons family was powerful. Harrison Mangan was powerful. Who would have believed a housekeeper over them?" "I would have." But even as Elliot said it, he wondered if it was true. 5 years ago, he'd been younger, more trusting of his father, more willing to believe that the world worked the way it was supposed to. What about Cynthia? How does she fit into this? Marcus told her everything, bragged about it, from what I understand. How he'd helped run off the gold-digging maid, how he'd protected you from making a terrible mistake. Martha's expression hardened. When Naomi showed up at Magnon Tower 8 months ago, Marcus recognized her immediately. He's the one who hired her, put her in the basement where she'd be invisible, where she'd never cross paths with you. It was a game to him. And Cynthia? Cynthia worshipped her brother, still does. When you fired her for abusing those children, she didn't know who they were at first. But Marcus told her they were Naomi's daughters, that they might be yours. Martha's voice dropped. The cruelty in that kitchen wasn't random, Mr. Mangan. Cynthia knew exactly who those girls were. It was deliberate. Revenge for what she believed Naomi had done to her precious brother's reputation 5 years ago. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The fake emails sent to CPS, the manufactured evidence, the coordinated attack in the media. It wasn't just about revenge for being fired. It was about punishing Naomi for daring to file a complaint against Marcus Parsons 5 years ago, for threatening the family's pristine reputation. "They're destroying us," Elliot said quietly, "because Naomi tried to defend herself from assault." "Yes," Martha pushed the documents across the table. "But now you have proof. Proof that Marcus assaulted her. Proof that your father buried the complaint. Proof that this whole situation was orchestrated by people with a vendetta." Elliot gathered the papers carefully, his hands steadier now. Purpose crystallized in his mind, clear and sharp and absolute. "Will you testify? Go on record with what you know?" Martha hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "The NDA is void if it was used to cover up a crime. Assault is a crime. Witness intimidation is a crime. I have the best lawyers in New York, Martha. They'll protect you. But I need you to help me protect my daughters. Please." The old woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she squared her shoulders. And Elliot saw the strength that had kept her secrets for 5 years. and the courage it took to finally break her silence. "All right," she said. "I'll testify. Those babies deserve better than what's being done to them. And Naomi," her voice caught, "Naomi deserved better 5 years ago. It's time someone told the truth." Elliot was back in Manhattan by noon, the envelope of documents locked in his briefcase like a weapon. He went straight to his lawyer's office, bypassing the receptionist, striding into Richard Stone's corner suite without knocking. "Tell me you're ready to file," he said without preamble, "because I just got everything we need." For the next 2 hours, they built their case. The original harassment complaint, Martha's testimony, the evidence of document destruction, Richard's digital forensics showing Cynthia's fabricated emails, the timeline that proved Marcus and Cynthia Parsons had orchestrated this entire nightmare out of vindictive cruelty. "This is solid," Richard said, leaning back in his chair. "More than solid. With Martha's testimony and these documents, we can prove malicious prosecution. We can file for emergency custody return. We can destroy them." Elliot's voice was ice. "I want Marcus Parsons fired. I want Cynthia charged with filing false reports. I want everyone who participated in this to face consequences. They will. I promise you, they will." Richard stood, gathering files. "I'll have the emergency motion filed within the hour. We should have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow, day after at the latest." "Make it tomorrow." Elliot stood as well. "Every day my daughters are in that facility is another day of trauma. I won't let them suffer a single moment longer than necessary." He found Naomi at the courthouse, exactly where Richard had told him she'd be. She'd been coming every day since the girls were taken, sitting in the family court waiting area from open to close, hoping for any news, any update, any chance to see her daughters. She looked like a ghost of herself. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. She'd barely eaten in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She sat hunched on a plastic chair, her hands clutching a folder of documents she'd brought to prove she was a fit mother, even though no one had agreed to look at them. "Naomi," she looked up at his voice, and something in her hollow expression broke his heart all over again. "Any news?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did they call you? Is there a hearing date?" Elliot crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye-level. He took her cold hands in his. "Tomorrow. We have a hearing tomorrow. And Naomi, I found her. I found Martha Lane." Naomi's breath caught. "Martha? But she left. She's been carrying the truth for 5 years. About Marcus. About my father. About what they did to you." He pulled out his phone, showing her photos of the documents. "She kept copies of everything. Your complaint, the witness statements, the proof that you were silenced." Naomi stared at the screen, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought no one would believe me. I thought I was crazy for even trying to report it. And then when your father made it disappear, you weren't crazy. You were brave, and they were criminals." Elliot squeezed her hands. "Marcus assaulted you. My father covered it up, and Cynthia has been punishing you for it ever since. But it ends now. Tomorrow, we go before a judge with the truth, all of it." "What if it's not enough?" Naomi's voice cracked. "What if they still don't believe us? What if—" "Then we fight harder. We appeal. We take it to the media with our version of the story. We don't stop until our daughters are home." He cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I'm going to fix this, Naomi. All of it. I swear on everything I am." I'm going to bring them home." For the first time in days, something like hope flickered in her eyes. "I'm so tired of being powerless." "You're not powerless. You survived 5 years alone with 3 children. You filed a complaint against a powerful man, even knowing it could cost you everything. You're the strongest person I've ever known." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But you don't have to be strong alone anymore. We fight this together." Naomi nodded, wiping her eyes. "Together." "Come on." Elliot kept her hand in his as they walked toward the courthouse exit. "Richard's filing the emergency motion now. We need to prepare for tomorrow, and there's someone I want you to talk to." "Who?" "Martha Lane. She wants to apologize for not speaking up sooner, and she wants you to know," his voice caught slightly, "she wants you to know that she always believed you, that she's ready to make it right." As they stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, Naomi stopped, turning to face him. "Elliot, I need to say something." "What?" "5 years ago, I loved you. I was too scared and too ashamed to tell you about the babies. But I loved you, and I've hated myself every day since for not being braver." She took a shaking breath. "I don't know if you can forgive me for keeping them from you. I don't know if we can ever be whatever we were. But I need you to know, I never stopped. Loving you, I mean, even when I was angry at you, even when I thought you'd forgotten me. I never stopped." Elliot pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "There's nothing to forgive. You survived. You protected our daughters. That's all that matters." He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "And for the record, I never stopped either. Every woman I met, I compared to you. None of them measured up." A small, broken laugh escaped her. "We're a mess." "Yeah," he smiled slightly, "but we're a mess together. And tomorrow, we start putting the pieces back together. For them, for us." Naomi nodded, leaning into him. And for the first time in 5 days, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. That night, in the temporary care facility in Queens, 3 small girls lay in their shared bed, clutching their family photo and each other. "I miss Mommy," Nessa whispered into the darkness. "Tomorrow," Nia said with more confidence than she felt. Sarah said maybe tomorrow. "Promise?" Nola asked. "Promise?" They didn't know about the hearing, didn't know about Martha Lane, or the documents, or the case being built to bring them home. They only knew that they missed their mother's voice, their father's stories, the feeling of being safe. But tomorrow, the fight would begin. And this time, the truth would have a voice. The Manhattan Family Court building was a fortress of gray stone and bureaucratic indifference. Elliot and Naomi arrived 30 minutes early, flanked by Richard Stone and a paralegal carrying 3 briefcases full of evidence. Media vans already lined the street. Word had leaked about the hearing, and cameras tracked their every step from the car to the entrance. "Ms. Carter, do you regret keeping the children from their father?" "Mr. Mangan, are you seeking full custody? Is it true you're paying Naomi Carter for her silence?" Richard's security team formed a barrier, pushing through the crowd. Naomi kept her head down, her hand gripping Elliot's so tightly her knuckles went white. They didn't speak until they were inside, through security. Sequestered in a small conference room reserved for attorneys and their clients. "They're going to try to break you on the stand," Richard warned Naomi, his expression grave. "They'll ask about your finances, your living conditions, every decision you've made in the last 5 years. They'll make you look desperate, possibly unstable. You need to stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate." I know. Naomi's voice was steady, but Elliot could see her hands shaking in her lap. I've been preparing for this my whole life, it seems. People questioning whether I'm good enough. You're more than good enough, Elliot said quietly, and today, everyone's going to see that. At 9 a.m. sharp, they were called into courtroom 4C. Judge Helena Reeves presided, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for suffering no fools. She'd been on the family court bench for 20 years, had seen every variation of human tragedy and deception, and her bullshit detector was legendary. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat Elliot, Naomi, and their legal team. On the other, the attorneys from Child Protective Services, flanked by 2 supervisors. And in the back row, looking smaller and more bitter than Elliot had ever seen her, sat Cynthia Parsons, dressed in an expensive black suit as if attending a funeral. This is an emergency hearing regarding case number FC 2024-8847, Judge Reeves began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The matter of temporary custody of 3 minor children, currently in state care. Let's begin with the petitioners. Mr. Stone? Richard stood, his bearing confident but respectful. Your Honor, we're here today because my clients, Mr. Elliot Mangan and Miss Naomi Carter, have been victims of a coordinated campaign of harassment and false allegations. 3 children were removed from a safe, loving home based on fabricated evidence provided by a vindictive former employee seeking revenge. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Stone. And we have serious evidence to support it, Your Honor. Richard began laying out the case, the timeline of Cynthia's firing, the suspicious timing of the CPS complaint, the metadata from the fabricated emails. We also have testimony from Martha Lane, a former employee who can speak to the history of harassment Ms. Carter endured at the hands of Marcus Parsons, Cynthia Parsons's brother. Your Honor, interrupted Margaret Walsh, the CPS attorney, a severe woman with sharp features and sharper questioning. The petitioners are trying to distract from the core issue. We removed those children because of documented concerns about the appropriateness of the living situation. A former maid suddenly living in a penthouse with her billionaire employer. Children exposed to intense media scrutiny. Questions about coercion. Questions based on lies, Richard countered. Manufactured by someone with a documented vendetta. Judge Reeves raised her hand for silence. I'll hear the evidence. Ms. Walsh, call your first witness. The CPS case was built on innuendo and implications. Their psychologist testified about the trauma of sudden lifestyle changes and the confusion children might experience when their mother's circumstances changed dramatically overnight. Their investigator detailed the media circus surrounding the family, showing photos of photographers outside the Bronx apartment, tabloid headlines, social media vitriol. These children were thrust into a spotlight no 4-year-old should endure, the investigator testified. The question isn't whether Mr. Mangan has resources to provide for them. Clearly, he does. The question is whether this environment is stable and healthy. And the allegations of coercion? Ms. Walsh prompted. The emails we received suggested a pattern of Mr. Mangan using his position of power to pressure Ms. Carter into a relationship. Promises of housing, employment, financial support, all contingent on her compliance. Elliot's jaw clenched. Every word was a distortion, a lie dressed up in professional language. When it was their turn, Richard dismantled the case piece by piece. He called a digital forensics expert who walked the court through the metadata analysis, showing conclusively that the emails had been created using a spoofing service sent from an IP address traced back to a coffee shop 3 blocks from Cynthia Parsons's apartment. These emails were fabricated, the expert testified. The headers are inconsistent with legitimate correspondence. The timestamps have been altered. This is not evidence. It's forgery. Ms. Walsh tried to recover. Even if we question those specific emails, the concerns about the living situation remain valid. Based on what? Richard's voice was sharp. Based on the fact that a mother accepted help for her children, that a father wanted to provide for daughters he'd just discovered? Since when is that grounds for removing children from their home? Judge Reeves made notes, her expression unreadable. Then Richard called Martha Lane. The elderly woman walked to the stand with quiet dignity, her hands folded calmly in her lap as she was sworn in. She looked directly at Cynthia as she spoke, and Cynthia's smug expression finally faltered. "I worked at the Mangan estate for 30 years, Martha testified. "I was there when Naomi Carter was employed. I was there when she filed a harassment complaint against Marcus Parsons for assault. And I was there when Harrison Mangan, Elliot's father, buried that complaint to protect business relationships." The courtroom went silent. Even Judge Reeves leaned forward slightly. "What kind of assault, Ms. Lane?" Richard asked gently. Marcus Parsons cornered Ms. Carter in the basement laundry room. He put his hands on her, threatened her, told her to stay away from Elliot Mangan or face consequences. She filed a formal complaint. 3 days later, she was paid to disappear, and the complaint was erased from company records. "But you kept copies." "I did, because I knew someday the truth would matter." Martha's voice strengthened. Naomi Carter didn't leave because she was a gold digger or because she was using Mr. Mangan. She left because she was terrorized by powerful men who thought they could do whatever they wanted to someone beneath their station. Ms. Walsh stood for cross-examination, but her heart wasn't in it. "Ms. Lane, you waited 5 years to come forward with this information. Why should the court believe you now?" "Because I was a coward then," Martha said simply. "I needed my job. I needed to protect my family. But those 3 little girls are in a state facility right now because I stayed silent. I can't live with that anymore. So yes, I'm speaking up now. Late is better than never." The gallery murmured. Judge Reeves called for order. During the lunch recess, Elliot found Cynthia in the hallway, speaking urgently on her phone. When she saw him approaching, she ended the call and straightened her spine, defiance radiating from every pore. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Come to understand." Elliot stopped a few feet away, his voice low and controlled. "I fired you for abusing children. That should have been the end of it. But you couldn't let it go. You had to destroy them, had to punish Naomi for something that happened 5 years ago. Wait. Because people like her don't get to win." Cynthia's mask finally cracked, rage spilling through. She was a maid, a nobody. She had no business being with someone like you, having your children, playing house in your penthouse. She should have stayed in her place. Her place. Elliot's voice was deadly quiet. "You destroyed innocent lives, traumatized 3-4-year-olds, separated them from their mother, to protect your pride, to protect your brother's reputation. Do you understand what you've done?" "I protected the natural order of things." Cynthia stepped closer, her voice shaking. "My brother is a good man. He tried to save you from making a mistake. And Naomi Carter tried to ruin him with false accusations. Someone had to stop her. Those accusations weren't false. Your brother assaulted her. My father covered it up. And you..." Elliot's control finally slipped. "You took out your family's guilt on 3 innocent children. You made them lick floors. You fabricated evidence. You tore apart a family because you thought we didn't deserve to exist." "You don't?" Cynthia's voice was ice. "She trapped you with those children. She's using you for your money, and everyone will see that eventually. No, Elliot's voice was firm, final. Everyone will see you for what you are. A cruel, vindictive woman who hurt children because she couldn't stand the thought of someone she deemed inferior finding happiness. He turned and walked away, leaving Cynthia standing alone in the hallway, her face white with impotent rage. The afternoon session began with Naomi's testimony. She walked to the stand with her shoulders back, her voice steady. Richard had coached her, but this wasn't performance. This was a mother fighting for her children with the only weapons she had, truth and dignity. "Ms. Carter," Richard began gently, "tell the court about the last 5 years, about raising your daughters alone." Naomi took a breath. "After I left the Mangan estate, I moved to the Bronx with the money Harrison Mangan gave me. When I found out I was pregnant, with triplets, that money suddenly didn't seem like very much." A small, sad smile. "I worked as a cleaner at a hospital, then at an office building. When the girls were born, I worked nights so I could be with them during the day. My mother helped when she could, but mostly it was just us. Was it difficult? It was impossible, but I did it anyway because they're my daughters." Naomi's voice strengthened. "I've fed them pasta for dinner 100 nights in a row because it was all I could afford. I've patched their clothes instead of buying new ones. I've worked 16-hour shifts and come home to read them stories even when I was so tired I could barely see straight. Not because I'm a saint, because I'm their mother. That's what mothers do." "And when you came to work at Magnan Tower 8 months ago, did you know Elliot Mangan was the CEO? "Not at first. I just needed a job that paid slightly better. When I realized where I was working, I considered leaving. But I needed the money, and I hoped, that I could stay invisible. That we'd never cross paths." "Did you ever intend to tell him about his daughters?" Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Every day. And every day I was too scared. Scared he wouldn't believe me. Scared he'd take them away. Scared he'd hate me for keeping them from him." She looked directly at Elliot. "I was wrong to be scared. I should have trusted him. But fear makes you do foolish things." Ms. Walsh stood for cross-examination, her expression cold. "Ms. Carter, isn't it true that you accepted $20,000 to leave and never contact Mr. Mangan again?" "I accepted money from Harrison Mangan, yes, after he threatened to destroy my family if I didn't." "But you took it." "Yes." Naomi's voice didn't waver. "I was 23 years old, pregnant, and terrified. I took the money and tried to survive." "If that makes me a bad person in your eyes, so be it. But it doesn't make me a bad mother. You lived in poverty while your children's father was a billionaire. You could have contacted him at any time." "I tried." Naomi's voice rose slightly. "I called his office. I sent emails. I was blocked by the same systems that protect him from hundreds of people trying to reach him every day. I'm a cleaning lady, Ms. Walsh. I don't have connections or lawyers or access. I had my hands and my back and my love for my children. That's all. And now you're living in his penthouse, accepting his money. Now I'm letting my daughter's father be part of their lives. If that's a crime, charge me with it. But don't you dare suggest I'm using him when all I've ever done is survive." The courtroom was silent. Even Ms. Walsh seemed momentarily at a loss. Judge Reeves made more notes, her expression thoughtful. The final witness was Sarah Chen, the social worker from the temporary care facility. She took the stand reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight. "Miss Chen," Richard began, "you've been caring for the triplets since they were removed from their home. Can you describe their emotional state?" Sarah's expression was pained. "They're traumatized. They cry for their mother constantly. They ask when the nice man, Mr. Mangan, is coming to get them. They don't understand why they've been taken away. In my 15 years doing this work, I've rarely seen children so bonded to their parents, so desperate to go home. Have you observed anything that suggests they were unsafe in Mr. Mangan's care? The opposite. They talk about him reading them stories, making them laugh. They show me the family photo he sent with their belongings. They're clearly loved and well cared for. Ms. Walsh tried to redirect. But isn't it true that sudden changes in lifestyle can be disorienting for children? It can be, but separation from loving parents is far more traumatic than adjusting to a nicer home. Sarah's voice was firm. Those girls need their mother. They need their father. Every day they spend in state care is causing damage that will take years to undo. Judge Reeves set down her pen. I think I've heard enough for today. However, there is one matter that must be resolved before I can make a final ruling. Elliot's stomach dropped. Mr. Mangan, you've claimed paternity of these children, but I see no DNA test results in the evidence presented. Before I can rule on custody, I need scientific confirmation of biological paternity. Your Honor, Richard stood quickly. We can arrange testing immediately. I've already arranged it, Judge Reeves said. Mr. Mangan and the 3 children will undergo DNA testing this afternoon at the courthouse facility. Results will be expedited and should be available within 48 hours. She looked at both legal teams. We'll reconvene in 2 days for my final ruling. Until then, the temporary custody order remains in place. Naomi made a small sound of distress. 2 more days. 2 more days without her daughters. Elliot reached for her hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. However, Judge Reeves continued, her voice softening slightly, given the testimony I've heard today, I'm authorizing a supervised visitation this evening. 2 hours, Ms. Carter and Mr. Mangan may see the children together, supervised by a social worker. Naomi's sob of relief echoed through the courtroom. Court is adjourned. We reconvene Friday morning at 9 a.m. The gavel came down. As they stood, Elliot pulled Naomi into his arms. She was crying against his chest, her whole body shaking with a mixture of relief and exhaustion and hope. 2 more days, he whispered into her hair. Just 2 more days, and then they're coming home. I promise. Across the courtroom, Cynthia Parsons gathered her things and walked out, her head high. But Elliot saw the fear in her eyes. She knew the truth was coming. She knew her lies were unraveling, and in 2 days, she'd finally face the consequences of what she'd done. The envelope arrived at Richard Stone's office at 7:43 a.m. on Friday morning, 48 hours after the DNA samples had been collected, 17 minutes before they were due back in court. Richard's hands were steady as he opened it, but Elliot's shook as he reached for the document inside. The header read, DNA paternity test results, confidential. Elliot's eyes scanned down to the conclusions. Alleged father, Elliot James Mangan. For each of his 3 daughters, Nia Carter, Nola Carter, and Nessa Carter, the results showed the same thing. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. 3 daughters. 3 perfect, beautiful, undeniable daughters. Elliot sank into the chair across from Richard's desk, the paper trembling in his hands. He'd known. Of course he'd known. But seeing it confirmed in black and white, in scientific certainty that no one could question or dismiss or doubt, they're mine. His voice cracked. Officially, legally, scientifically, mine. Yes? Richard smiled, something rare and genuine. Now, Let's go get them back. The scene outside the courthouse was chaos. Word had leaked that DNA results would be presented today, and the media presence had tripled. News vans from every major network lined the street. Reporters jockeyed for position on the steps. Protesters had even shown up, some holding signs supporting Elliot and Naomi. Reunite this family, others condemning them. Billionaires think they're above the law. Elliot's security team had to force a path through the crowd. Camera flashes exploded in his face. Microphones were thrust toward him from every direction. Mr. Mangan, did the DNA test confirm paternity? Are you seeking full custody? What do you say to critics who claim this is about money? Elliot kept his head down, his jaw set, the envelope clutched against his chest like a shield. Beside him, Naomi walked with her shoulders back. Her fear transformed into something harder, something unbreakable. She'd spent 2 days visiting her daughters in supervised sessions, 2 precious hours each evening, where she held them and read to them and promised they'd be home soon. 2 days of her babies asking when they could come home. 2 days of saying, "Soon, baby, soon," and praying it was true. Today, they'd find out. Inside the courthouse, they were ushered into a private conference room. Naomi paced while Richard reviewed his notes. Elliot stood at the window, watching the circus below, thinking about his daughters waking up in that facility this morning, wondering if today was finally the day. "Whatever happens in there," Naomi said suddenly, stopping her pacing to look at him, "I want you to know, you've been amazing through this. I couldn't have survived it without you." "You're stronger than you think," Elliot said. "You survived 5 years alone. These 5 days were nothing compared to that." "These 5 days nearly broke me," her voice was raw. "At least before, they were with me, safe with me. This not knowing if they're scared, if they're eating, if they understand why we haven't come for them, ends today." Elliot crossed to her, taking her hands. "One way or another, this ends today." A knock at the door. Helen, Elliot's assistant, poked her head in. "They're ready for you." Courtroom 4C. Judge Helena Reeves looked like she hadn't slept much either. Her expression was grave as the courtroom filled. Lawyers, social workers, court reporters, and in the back rows, Cynthia Parsons, flanked by her own attorney, and Marcus Parsons, who had been subpoenaed but had somehow managed to avoid testifying in the previous session. Not today. Today, everyone would answer for what they'd done. "We're here for final arguments and ruling in case FC 2024-8847, Judge Reeves began. "Mr. Stone, I understand you have new evidence to present?" "Yes, Your Honor." Richard stood, and Elliot felt every eye in the room shift to them. "We have received the DNA test results. With the court's permission, I'd like to enter them into evidence." He handed a copy to the judge, to Ms. Walsh, and kept one for the record. Judge Reeves studied the document, her expression unreadable. "The results confirm with 99.99% certainty that Mr. Elliot Mangan is the biological father of all 3 children." Richard's voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. "This was never in doubt for my clients, but I understand the court required scientific confirmation. Now we have it." Ms. Walsh stood, her expression tight. "Your Honor, while paternity is now established, our concerns about the living situation and the circumstances that led to this arrangement remain. Based on fabricated evidence," "Sorry," Richard interrupted. "Evidence we've proven was manufactured by Cynthia Parsons. Your Honor, I'd like to call Ms. Parsons to the stand." Cynthia's face went white. Her attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client is not on trial here. Your client filed the complaint that initiated this case," Judge Reeves said coolly. "I'll allow it. Ms. Parsons, take the stand. Cynthia walked to the witness box like someone approaching the gallows. Her expensive suit couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. She was sworn in, her voice barely audible. Richard approached slowly, holding a folder. Ms. Parsons, you filed the initial complaint with Child Protective Services, correct? I was concerned about the children's welfare. Concerned? Interesting. Richard opened the folder. Is this your phone number? He showed her a document. Yes. And these are your text messages with Derek Sampson, the journalist who wrote the initial tabloid story about Mr. Mangan? Richard handed copies to the judge. The messages where you explicitly state, and I quote, "You want a story about a CEO and 3 secret kids? I've got one." Cynthia's hands clenched on the armrest. I was trying to expose the truth. The truth. Let's talk about truth. Richard's voice hardened. Did you personally witness any abuse or neglect of these children by Mr. Mangan? No. But did you have any evidence beyond the emails you submitted? Emails we've now proven were fabricated using spoofing software? I believe they were real. Did you create them yourself, Ms. Parsons? Silence. Long, damning silence. Ms. Parsons, you're under oath. Did you create the false emails that were submitted as evidence to Child Protective Services? Cynthia's attorney stood. Your Honor, I need to confer with my client. Sit down, counselor. Judge Reeves's voice was steel. Ms. Parsons, answer the question. Cynthia's face crumpled. I didn't create them. My brother did. But I knew. I knew they were fake, and I sent them anyway. The courtroom erupted. The gallery murmured. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously. Judge Reeves called for order, her gavel cracking like thunder. Wafiku, Richard's voice cut through the chaos. Why would you submit false evidence to remove children from their home? Because she didn't deserve them. The words burst from Cynthia like a confession she'd been holding back for years. Naomi Carter? She was nobody. A cleaner. She tried to ruin my brother's career with false accusations, and then she trapped Elliot with those children. She didn't deserve to win. She didn't deserve to live in a penthouse and play happy family when she'd caused so much damage. What false accusations? Richard pressed. The harassment complaint your brother filed against Ms. Carter 5 years ago? My brother didn't harass her. He was protecting Elliot from making a mistake. By assaulting her, by threatening her, by having his father bury the complaint? Richard pulled out Martha Lane's testimony, the original documents. We have witnesses, Ms. Parsons. We have evidence. Your brother assaulted Naomi Carter, and when she tried to report it, powerful men made it disappear. And you've been punishing her for it ever since. Cynthia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. She was trying to destroy our family, everything we'd built. My brother is a good man. Your brother is a predator who used his position to assault a young woman. And you fabricated evidence to tear 3 children from their mother because you couldn't stand the thought of her being happy. Richard's voice was quiet, but devastating. No further questions, Your Honor. Cynthia collapsed in the witness box, her sobs echoing through the silent courtroom. Her attorney helped her down, his face grim. Judge Reeves sat back, her expression carved from stone. Ms. Walsh, do you have any remaining arguments for the state? Margaret Walsh stood slowly. For a moment, she looked like she might continue fighting. Then she glanced at Naomi, at the exhausted mother who'd fought so hard for her children, and something in her expression softened. No, Your Honor. In light of the testimony and evidence presented, the state withdraws its objections. We recommend the children be returned to their parents immediately. Naomi's sob of relief was audible. Elliot gripped her hand so tightly his knuckles went white. Judge Reeves picked up her gavel, and the courtroom held its breath. "I've presided over family court for 20 years, she began, her voice measured. "I've seen every variation of human tragedy. Abuse, neglect, addiction, violence. But this case—" She paused. "This case is different. These children were not removed because they were in danger. They were removed because vindictive people decided to weaponize the child welfare system to punish a woman they deemed unworthy of happiness." She looked directly at Cynthia. "Ms. Parsons, you will face criminal charges for filing false reports and obstruction. That's not my jurisdiction. But I'll be recommending prosecution to the fullest extent of the law." Then she turned to Elliot and Naomi. "Mr. Mangan, Miss Carter, I see no reason why these children should spend one more night in state care. Joint custody is hereby granted. The temporary custody order is dissolved. Child Protective Services will close this case immediately and facilitate the children's return home within the hour." The gavel came down. For a moment, no one moved. Then Naomi's legs gave out, and she collapsed into Elliot's arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Around them, the courtroom erupted. Richard was shaking hands with his team, reporters were rushing for the doors to file their stories, and somewhere in the chaos, Cynthia was being led away by her attorney. But Elliot heard none of it. He just held Naomi while she cried 5 days' worth of fear and relief into his chest. "They're coming home," he whispered into her hair. "They're coming home." The reunion happened in a private room at the courthouse, a small institutional space with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting that somehow became the most beautiful place in the world. When 3 small girls burst through the door. "Mommy! Elliot!" Naomi dropped to her knees, just in time to catch all 3 of them, wrapping her arms around the tangle of small bodies and crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Elliot knelt beside them, his arms around all 4 of them, and for the first time in 5 days, his daughters were in his arms where they belonged. "We missed you so much," Naya sobbed into Naomi's shoulder. "Sarah said you were coming, but we didn't believe her. We thought you forgot about us," Nola whispered. "Never." Naomi pulled back just enough to look at each of their faces. "Never, never, never. Mommy would never forget you. We were fighting to bring you home, and we won." "Are we going home now?" Nessa asked, her small hands clutching Elliot's shirt. "To the big house with the windows?" "Yes, sweetheart." Elliot's voice was rough. "Right now. And you're never leaving again. I promise." Sarah Chen stood in the doorway, watching with tears in her eyes. "I'll get their things," she said quietly, and slipped away. For 5 minutes, they just held each other. No words, just touch, reassurance that this was real, that they were together, that the nightmare was over. Finally, Sarah returned with 3 small backpacks and the stuffed animals that had traveled with the girls. "They never let go of the photos you sent," she said to Elliot. "Slept with them every night." "Thank you," Elliot said, standing with Nessa in his arms. "Thank you for taking care of them." "I'm just glad they're going home." Sarah smiled through her tears. "That's where they always belonged." Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had reached fever pitch. But Elliot Mangan, CEO and father, no longer cared about optics or image or what the press would say. He walked out those doors with a daughter on each side and Naomi carrying the 3rd. And when the cameras swarmed, he stopped. Richard started to intervene, but Elliot shook his head. "I want to say something." The reporters fell silent, microphones extended, cameras rolling. Elliot looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. 5 days ago, my daughters were taken from their mother and me based on lies. Lies told by someone who thought she had the right to punish a woman for daring to rise above the station assigned to her. Lies told because some people believe that class and money and connections matter more than human dignity. His voice strengthened. I'm standing here today to tell you they don't. My daughters are home because the truth matters. Because a brave woman named Martha Lane finally spoke up. Because a mother fought like hell for her children. And because a judge saw through the lies to the family underneath. He looked down at Naya, Nola, and Nessa, then back at the cameras. No child should ever be humiliated to make another person feel powerful. No woman should be punished for surviving, and no family should be torn apart because vindictive people decided to weaponize the systems meant to protect children. Naomi stepped closer, and Elliot wrapped his arm around her. This is my family. We're not perfect. We're figuring things out as we go. But we're real, and we're together, and that's all that matters. A reporter called out, Mr. Mangan, will you be pressing charges against Cynthia Parsons? The district attorney will make that decision, but I hope they do. What she did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal, and she needs to face consequences. What about your company? The stock drop, the board concerns? My company will be fine. My priority right now is my daughters. Everything else can wait. He looked at Naomi. Everything else has waited long enough. With that, they walked to the waiting car, surrounded by security but united as a family. As they drove away from the courthouse, away from the cameras and the chaos, Nessa leaned her head against Elliot's shoulder and whispered, Are we really home now? Yes, baby. He kissed the top of her head. We're really home. 2 blocks away, Cynthia Parsons emerged from the courthouse's side entrance with her attorney, hoping to avoid the media. But 2 NYPD officers were waiting. Cynthia Parsons, the taller officer said, holding up a badge. You're under arrest for filing false reports, obstruction of justice, and making false statements to law enforcement. You have the right to remain silent. The cameras found her anyway, captured the moment the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, captured her face, no longer defiant, just broken and afraid. By evening, the arrest would be on every news channel. The full story would come out. Marcus Parsons' assault, Harrison Mangan's cover-up, the systematic abuse of power that had nearly destroyed an innocent family. But in a penthouse in Tribeca, none of that mattered. Elliot and Naomi sat on the floor with their daughters, surrounded by toys and blankets and the beautiful chaos of family. The girls were already planning tomorrow. Could they go to the park? Could they have pancakes for breakfast? Could Elliot read them 3 stories tonight instead of 1? And watching them, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace. Elliot caught her eye across the room and smiled. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled back. Really smiled. Without fear or reservation. They'd won. The truth had won. And tomorrow, they'd start building the life they should have had all along. 6 months later, the press conference room at Magnan corporate headquarters was packed. Reporters, business journalists, nonprofit leaders, and community advocates filled every seat. Cameras positioned at the back to capture what Forbes had already called the most significant corporate philanthropy launch of the year. But Elliot Mangan barely noticed the crowd. His attention was focused on the woman standing beside him at the podium, poised, confident, radiant, in a navy dress that spoke of professionalism and quiet strength. Naomi Carter had come a long way from the basement laundry room. "Thank you all for being here," Naomi said, her voice steady and clear. "6 months ago, I was a single mother working 3 jobs, struggling to keep my daughters fed and clothed. I lived every day with the fear that one wrong move, one missed rent payment, one emergency would send everything crashing down. That's the reality for millions of parents, especially single mothers, across this country." She paused, looking out at the audience. The Naomi Carter Foundation exists to change that reality. We're launching with an initial endowment of $50 million provided by Magnon Corporate to support 3 core initiatives: emergency financial assistance for single parents, workplace equity programs to ensure fair treatment regardless of class or background, and legal advocacy for families facing systemic injustice. The room erupted in applause. Elliot watched Naomi handle questions from the press with grace, explaining the foundation's structure, discussing their partnerships with existing nonprofits, outlining their goals for the first year. She'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this, working with advisors and attorneys and nonprofit experts to build something real, something that would outlast the news cycle and make genuine change. "Ms. Carter," a reporter from the New York Times called out, "how does it feel to go from cleaning offices to running a major foundation?" Naomi smiled, and Elliot saw the hint of the woman he'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. The one who read philosophy during her breaks, who dreamed bigger than the confines of her circumstances allowed. "It feels like finally being seen," she said simply. "For 6 months, I've learned that I'm capable of far more than I ever imagined. But I was always capable. I just never had the opportunity to prove it." That's what this foundation is about, creating opportunities for people who've been told they don't belong in certain spaces, who've been kept invisible by systems designed to maintain the status quo. Another wave of applause. Elliot stepped forward to wrap up the conference, but not before catching Naomi's eye and seeing the quiet pride there. Not pride in the attention or the accolades, but pride in knowing she'd transformed her pain into purpose. That evening, the penthouse was alive with a different kind of energy. Nia, Nola, and Nessa were having a tea party in the living room, an elaborate affair involving stuffed animals, plastic cups, and approximately half the cookies from the kitchen. Their laughter echoed off the high ceilings, a sound that Elliot had come to treasure more than any business deal or board approval. "Mr. Bear would like more tea, please," Nessa announced in her most serious voice, holding up a purple elephant that had somehow become Mr. Bear in the girls' elaborate game. "That's not Mr. Bear, that's Princess Trunk," Nola corrected, giggling. "It can be both," Nia declared with the authority of the eldest. "People can be more than one thing." From the kitchen, Naomi caught Elliot's eye and smiled. In that simple exchange of glances was 6 months of healing, of family dinners and bedtime stories, of homework help and playground visits, of slowly rebuilding trust and discovering what they could be together. The legal aftermath had been brutal, but satisfying. Cynthia Parsons had been convicted of filing false reports and obstruction of justice, sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. Marcus Parsons had been fired from Magnon Corporate and faced his own legal charges for the assault 5 years ago. Martha Lane's testimony had been damning, and the statute of limitations had barely expired. But the public exposure had destroyed his career anyway. Harrison Mangan's reputation had taken hits posthumously. Business journals had run exposés on his abuse of power, his protection of predators, his willingness to destroy lives to maintain appearances. Elliot had cooperated with every investigation, provided every document, determined that his father's legacy would be truth, not the carefully constructed fiction Harrison had spent decades building. But more important than any of that, more important than justice or vindication or public opinion, was this: 3 little girls who laughed over tea parties, who ran to greet him when he came home from work, who called him Daddy without hesitation. "Dinner in 15 minutes, Naomi called to the girls. "Start cleaning up your tea party." A chorus of groans, then the sounds of toys being gathered and put away with varying degrees of compliance. Elliot moved to help, but Naomi caught his hand. "Let them do it themselves," she said softly. "They need to learn responsibility." "When did you become the expert?" he teased, pulling her closer. "When I realized I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm actually parenting." She leaned into him. "It's terrifying. You're amazing at it." "We're amazing at it," she corrected. Together. Together. They'd had that conversation dozens of times over the past 6 months. What they were to each other, what they wanted to become. They'd decided to take it slow. To focus on the girls, to let whatever existed between them develop naturally without pressure or expectations. But slow didn't mean absent. There were stolen kisses in the kitchen after the girls went to bed, hands finding each other during movies on the couch, conversations that stretched past midnight about dreams and fears and the future they were building. They hadn't defined it yet, hadn't put labels on it, but it was real and growing and starting to feel like forever. 3 weeks later, on a crisp Saturday in early autumn, they took the girls to a private park outside the city, a place where they could run and play without cameras or curious onlookers. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. Nia, Nola, and Nessa raced across the grass, their laughter carried on the wind. They'd started school 2 months ago, a small private academy with excellent security and teachers who'd been briefed on their unique situation. The adjustment had been smoother than anyone expected. The girls had made friends, were learning to read, came home every day with paintings and stories and endless enthusiasm. "Watch me, Daddy," Nessa called, hanging upside down from the monkey bars. "I see you, baby. Be careful," Elliot called back, his heart in his throat every time one of them attempted something that looked even remotely dangerous. "They're fine," Naomi said, amused. "You can't protect them from every scraped knee." "Watch me try." But he relaxed slightly, settling onto the bench beside her. For a while, they just watched. 3 identical girls in matching yellow dresses, their choice, not Naomi's, playing with the fierce joy that only children possessed. Elliot tried to capture the image in his memory, the afternoon light, the sound of their laughter, the feeling of Naomi's hand in his. "I've been thinking," Naomi said quietly, not taking her eyes off the girls, "about that day. The day you walked into the kitchen and saw Cynthia making Nessa lick the floor." Elliot tensed slightly. They'd talked about it before, but it still made his blood run cold to remember. "You lost control," Naomi continued. "I saw it in your eyes. The CEO, the businessman, the carefully composed billionaire, he disappeared. And someone else emerged, someone who would do anything to protect those children." "I didn't know they were mine yet," Elliot said softly. But it didn't matter. Seeing a child being humiliated like that, something just snapped. "I'm glad it did." Naomi turned to look at him now, her eyes shining. "Because that moment, that loss of control, it gave me back everything I'd lost. My daughters, my dignity, my life. You." Elliot cupped her face gently. "I'd do it again, 1,000 times over." I'd lose control, burn down my reputation, fight the whole world if it meant finding them, finding you. I know. She leaned into his touch. That's why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, the first time either had said them out loud in 7 years. Elliot's breath caught. Say that again, he whispered. I love you. Naomi smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. I loved you 7 years ago in that garden. I loved you 5 years ago when I left, even though I was terrified. I loved you 6 months ago when you fought for our daughters. And I love you now? I think I've loved you every moment in between. Elliot kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, all 3 girls were watching from the playground, matching expressions of delighted conspiracy on their faces. Are you kissing? Nia called, scandalized and thrilled. Does that mean you're getting married? Nola asked. Can we be flower girls? Nessa added immediately. Elliot and Naomi laughed, the sound mixing with the autumn breeze and the rustling leaves and the perfect imperfection of the moment. Maybe someday, Naomi called back. Now get back to playing. The girls squealed and returned to their game, but Elliot saw them whispering to each other, already planning a wedding that might or might not happen. Building dreams the way children did, with absolute certainty that happy endings were real. And maybe they were right. 3 months later, December, the Naomi Carter Foundation's holiday gala was held in the grand ballroom of Magnon Tower, the same building where Naomi had once cleaned toilets in the basement, where Elliot had once walked past her without knowing she was there, where their story had almost ended before it could truly begin. Now she stood at the center of the room in an emerald gown, greeting donors and partners and the families the foundation had already helped. Over the past 3 months, they'd provided emergency assistance to over 200 families, launched workplace equity training in 50 companies, and funded legal representation for parents fighting unjust custody battles. You're staring, Richard Stone said, appearing beside Elliot with a glass of champagne. Can you blame me? Elliot watched Naomi laugh at something a donor said, watched her command the room with quiet confidence. 6 months ago, I didn't even know I had daughters. Now I have a family, and I'm watching the woman I love change the world. You helped. I wrote checks. She did everything else. Elliot smiled. She's extraordinary. So are you. Richard clinked his glass against Elliot's. You could have protected your reputation, let the lawyers handle everything from a distance. Instead, you fought. You made it personal. That took courage. It was personal. There are my daughters. Elliot paused. She's everything. Across the room, Naomi was looking for him. When their eyes met, she smiled. That particular smile that was just for him, and started making her way through the crowd. Dance with me? She asked when she reached him. Always. They moved to the dance floor as a jazz trio started a slow number. Other couples joined them, but Elliot barely noticed. His attention was completely focused on the woman in his arms. The foundation received another major donation today, Naomi said. Anonymous, $5 million. Really? That's incredible. It came with a note, for Naomi Carter, who taught me that dignity isn't given, it's inherent, and that fighting for the powerless is the most powerful thing anyone can do. She looked up at him. It was anonymous, but I know your handwriting, Elliot Mangan. He grinned, caught. I wanted to contribute beyond the company endowment. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Because you're right. Dignity is inherent, And watching you fight for it, for yourself, for our daughters, for every family the foundation helps, it's changed me, made me a better man, made me want to be worthy of you. You are worthy. Naomi's voice was fierce. You were always worthy. You just needed to remember that power is meaningless if you don't use it to protect the vulnerable. Is that what I'm doing? Every day. She rested her head against his chest. You're teaching our daughters that too. That being powerful means being kind. That having wealth means having responsibility. That true strength is using what you have to lift others up. They danced in comfortable silence for a while, the music washing over them, the glittering ballroom a world away from the basement laundry room and the courthouse, and the nights of tears and fear. "Marry me," Elliot said suddenly. Naomi's steps faltered. She pulled back to look at him. "What?" "Marry me. Not because of the girls, not because of appearances or expectations. Marry me because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life building a family with you. Because 7 years ago, I fell in love with a woman who read philosophy during her breaks and dreamed bigger than her circumstances, and I never stopped loving her." Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks, but she was smiling. "The girls will be insufferable. They've been planning this wedding for months." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to everything." The kiss that followed was witnessed by 200 gala attendees and captured by 3 photographers, but neither Elliot nor Naomi cared. They were too busy holding each other, laughing and crying and planning a future that had once seemed impossible. 6 months later, June. The wedding was small, just close friends, Naomi's family, Martha Lane, and 3 very excited flower girls who'd insisted on matching purple dresses and sparkly shoes. They held it in the garden of the Mangan estate, the same garden where Elliot and Naomi had first fallen in love all those years ago. As Naomi walked down the makeshift aisle, Elliot felt his throat tighten. She was beautiful, always had been, but today she was radiant. Not because of the dress or the setting or the flowers, but because of the peace in her eyes. The knowledge that she belonged here, not as staff or as someone temporary, but as family. As his wife. As herself. The ceremony was simple. They wrote their own vows, promises about partnership and respect, about building a life where dignity and love conquered cruelty, about teaching their daughters that every person had inherent worth, regardless of their circumstances. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nia, Nola, and Nessa cheered louder than anyone, throwing flower petals with abandon and demanding their turn to hug both parents. At the reception, as the sun set over the garden and string lights twinkled overhead, Naomi pulled Elliot aside. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for losing control that day, for fighting for us, for seeing me when the world was designed to keep me invisible." "Thank you," Elliot replied, "for surviving, for being brave enough to come back, for giving me the greatest gift, our daughters, our family." From across the garden, they heard Nessa's voice ring out, "Daddy! Mommy! Come dance with us!" They laughed and returned to their daughters, to their family, to the life they'd built from the ashes of cruelty and lies. And as they danced under the stars, 3 little girls giggling and twirling between them, Elliot realized that this was what truly mattered. Not the company, or the money, or the reputation, not the headlines, or the board meetings, or the empire he'd built. This, family, love, the laughter of children who'd been taught they mattered, who'd seen their parents fight for dignity and win, who would grow up knowing that compassion was stronger than cruelty, that truth was more powerful than lies. That night, after the girls were asleep in their rooms and the guests had left and the estate was quiet, Elliot and Naomi stood in the garden, their garden, under the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss 7 years ago. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that kitchen that day?" Naomi asked. "Every day," Elliot admitted. "I think about how close I came to never knowing them, never finding you again." "But you did." Naomi squeezed his hand. "You lost control, and in doing so, you found everything that matters." "I'd do it again," Elliot said, echoing words from months ago. 1,000 times over. "I know." Naomi smiled up at him, her face illuminated by moonlight and love. "That's why this works. Because when it mattered most, you chose compassion over cruelty. You chose love over appearance. You chose us." They stood together in the quiet garden, two people who'd been torn apart by lies and brought back together by truth. And in that moment, with their daughters sleeping peacefully upstairs and the future stretching out before them full of promise, they knew dignity and love had conquered cruelty, and that was all that truly mattered.